The Roanoke River Valley was settled in the early 1700s by colonists who found the valley's fertile bottomlands ideal for large-scale farming. Early settlers from Virginia and North Carolina shared trade and culture. By the late 18th century, a society of merchants, craftsmen, wealthy planters, small farmers, slaves, and freedmen had evolved in northeastern North Carolina. This region was the nation's center for horse racing before it moved to Kentucky. Much rich Revolutionary and antebellum history can be uncovered as we visit the gracious towns located along the route of this scenic byway. As the northernmost point of navigation on the Meherrin River, MURFREESBORO, first known as Murphy's Landing, was the farthest point a seagoing vessel might penetrate into the large and productive farming area. It was designated by Congress in 1790 as an official port of entry, and the customs records indicate profitable trade with New England and the West Indies. Successful ship merchants made Murfreesboro their home and impressed their outlook on the new town. They built impressive residences, such as this dwelling, which is now a museum. Each room of a historic house provides clues about the way people lived. Peek inside this children's room. See the chairs at the little table? Imagine playing checkers here, or swaying back and forth on the rocking horse. Picture the older children as they climbed up into this big bed, and the little ones that may have been tucked into the trundle below. If you were an older boy in the family, it was your chore to tighten the woven ropes that supported the mattress of a rope bed. That's where the expression comes from, sleep tight. A few doors down from the Wheeler House, in one of Murfreesboro's first commercial buildings, you find a typical law office. The judge that conducted business here had relatives that were French. Remember Lafayette? When citizens learned that the first place this famous general would stop in North Carolina was Murfreesboro, they selected Judge Manny to deliver the speech. It's possibly here, at this desk, that Manny wrote the welcoming address. Just a step away, inside the same museum, the focus shifts to a different type of history. Another of Murfreesboro's enterprising families, named the GATLINGs, were inventors. The display showcases the famous and powerful Gatling gun. Used briefly in the Civil War, this revolving battery gun was the world's first successful machine gun. To get a feel for how things change, it's always fun to visit a country store. You could spend hours poking through the array of merchandise, examining how basic but clever everyday items were when first mass-produced. To better understand how people lived, historians take a close look at artifacts. They ask, why were these items needed? Did that make life easier or more complicated? How did that change our culture and way of life? As a river port, Halifax was founded on the south bank of the Roanoke River in 1760 and became the county seat. Some public buildings in the historic district were fashioned of brick and were fireproof. The clerk's office served as a location for storing valuable court records. The printer's office is complete with a working press. Here you see how a galley was loaded with type, which had to be carefully arranged. Printers had to watch closely how letters were sequenced, minding their P's and Q's. The printer turned a large screw to press the paper against the inked type. Sheets of paper were run through the press, one sheet at a time. Printing a newspaper this way took a lot of time and care. Halifax was a crossroads and a social center. Inns and taverns did a brisk business. Many federal-style plantation buildings were constructed here. Contrasting with the life of plantation owners was the life of slaves that contributed to the economic prosperity of this rich life. Seldom mentioned, George Moses Horton, born a slave in Northampton County, taught himself to read and write poetry. He wrote the first book published in the South by a black man and called it The Hope of Liberty. Warrenton was established at the time of the American Revolution, an earlier cry for freedom. Like many other towns in this region, its citizens were patriots. Virtually every man in the county swore allegiance to North Carolina. Many served in the county militia. Direct descendants of those revolutionaries still live in the town and surrounding country. By the 1840s, Warrenton was a bustling trade center, also thriving on the wealth of tobacco and cotton plantations of the Roanoke Valley. Warrenton even owned its own railroad. Fine schools, a college and academy were established to educate its citizens. Today, the courthouse remains on the same town square that was drawn up in the original plot for the town. Stroll along the side streets to study the grace of the many fine homes, which reflect Warrenton's early prosperity. The Warrenton style displays dignified porches and entrances that include intricate detail. Great care was taken to build these grand homes. There are many different styles of architecture in Warrenton, including bracketed roof lines and arched window decorations. Warrenton was home to many successful people. This marker indicates the boyhood home of the Bragg brothers, who were lawyers, politicians, and soldiers active during the Confederacy. And this is the home site of John A. Hyman, North Carolina's first black congressman, who won election after the Civil War. Like many small towns on this scenic byway, Warrenton has interesting historic appeal. Its main street and relaxed atmosphere, where people greet and shop, serve the same function, but look and feel different than the malls of today.